Who created the mind? We will dive into the origin of the mind at the higher level, the pure mind. There is the positive, negative polarity of the mind, and also the idea of no mind. What does that mean? So, essentially, the mind is neither divine nor infinite. The mind is the agent. The mind was created. The mind is a tool. In the divine, there was never the mind. There will never be a mind because the pure soul in the divine doesn't need the mind. So at the highest level, the mind was created with the Par Brahmanda creations, which are positive creations. And the mind is a tool, a vehicle of consciousness, intelligence that the soul uses within the creation. And I want to emphasize that in the divine, where there is no creation, there is no need for the mind. So the soul didn't have a mind. It didn't need a mind. In its essence, it never needed it. And as we know, Par Brahmanda creation of 700 quadrillion universes is a positive creation. It's the creation of where the higher religions of the world recognize it as the highest, purest heavens. And some of the religions recognize it as already salvation and freedom or the presence of God. Very much so, because there is no negative current. There are no big troubles within the vastness of higher creations of Parbrahmanda. There are blissful abodes of devotion, the pure lands of Buddha, many highest heavens. All the highest heavens are there. So, who created the mind? In the higher sense, which very rarely ever experience it here on earth, it is the pure and positive mind. Now, it's not positive thinking, has nothing to do with that. It's the pure, positive, supportive intelligence as a tool that soul uses within the creation. So that vehicle of consciousness is created, is used in the Par Brahmanda. And who created the troubled mind, the duality, polarity, which we're very familiar with here on earth? Every human being is troubled by the mind. So this mind that everyone is familiar with is the tool of Lord Brahma or Kal Niranjan. Essentially, the mind that every human being has is the mind of Lord Brahma or Kal. Essentially, it is the trouble that troubles the soul, that veils the soul. Maya, illusion, veiling, the origin of it is also in part of Durga, the goddess, the mother that veils and then also helps to ascend and unveil. There's a duality in that too. So humans are troubled by the mind, which inherently has positive and negative polarity, and the veiling, the accumulations of distortions, conditioning, and so forth, that is also part of the cosmic experience. So Brahmanda, our universe, all of it is governed by the positive negative polarity. Our universe, in a cosmic sense, is created by Lord Kal, Brahm. And then we have all the under regions where there are also pretty heavens, but also very troubled areas, the subtle regions, lower heavens. Of course, if you do get there and you mingle in a nice places, you will be trouble-free, but not really free, because in these heavens, you have an allotment of time. So the soul, by the virtues, there's a whole game of virtues and vices. By attaining the virtues, virtuous merits, the soul can ascend to these subtler heavens, and it will have its earned holiday. So it will have its earned time in the heavens, in the subtle heavens. But that time will run out, and the soul will be sent back to undergo further incarnations, reincarnations. The cycles continue. So only by virtuous living, there is no guarantee that you will be free, because the soul is still entrapped in this universe. So who created the mind that everyone is familiar with? And essentially, is it your mind? No. You are given the vehicle of consciousness of the mind according to your virtues and karmas, the negative also actions. So you are given, according to your karma, a state of the mind. The mind itself is not yours. It is only here along for a ride. So individual mind is like a mini version of Lord Brahm or Kal. It is a cell of Lord Brahm Kal. It is not yours. Don't make your home in the mind. And what is this mind? All that you learn, and so to speak, you learn the lessons of what to do and not to do in the lower sense, all the right and wrong, all the laws of this and that, it will all go once you leave this body. When you're incarnated next, you have to relearn all of it again. And again, by the accumulated karma, you will either have it easier way or more difficult way. So this is why the sages do not see the mind as divine nor infinite. As the moon is bright due to the light of the sun, the moon doesn't have light. So it takes the light from the sun, it reflects the sun. So the same way the mind is bright due to the light of the soul. So this is the quote from Hazur Baba Sawan Singh. He further says that the brightness depends on the amount of light received from the soul. So the inherent nature of mind is materialistic, outward, and essentially negative in larger sense. I'm not speaking of small negativities. In a larger sense, it is a trouble for the soul. And when the mind goes inwardly, when it faces inwardly, it gets illumination from the soul. And when it faces outwardly, it associates itself with matter, knowledge, conditioning. In this universe, Brahmanda universe, the soul, when it enters, it takes on a covering of a fine phase of mind and matter. In the Anda regions of the universe, it takes another covering of more coarser or denser form. And when the soul enters Pinda by a physical universe, it takes on a third covering in addition of even more denser mind and matter. So with each of these coverings, the soul gets dimmed in proportion, and it gets, in a way, cut off from the divine Shabd, or the divine light and sound current. It's a process of veiling. So even these concepts of the universal mind, universal consciousness, is the mind of illusion. It's the prime weaver of Maya. The universal mind is the mind of Brahm, the Lord Brahm. He's the creator of the mind, sustainer of the mind, so to speak, destroyer of the mind. But essentially, when one experiences the Brahma Jyoti or the universal mind, the light of the universal mind, the stage of awareness, we may say, it is, yes, the origin, it is the light of the mind, and it is already beyond dualities, so to speak, but it is not the light of liberation. It is the light of the mind, the light of the universe. And within it, it has imbued the seeds of good and bad, as the Bible says, the knowledge of good and bad, the prime duality, the prime polarity is imbued in it. So this light of the universal mind, the universal consciousness, is essentially the light of Brahm or the light of Kal. So the yogis who attain this stage of enlightenment are not free at all. They experience the freedom from duality. This is why it's the first step of non-duality. So they believe that they're free, but there is a trick that next life they will be sent back into the universe. They have experienced the first stage of enlightenment, but they will go back and until they experience more real enlightenment, which is beyond the tricks of Lord Brahm. So the mind is a sower and the soul is the reaper. It's the supreme trick of Lord Brahm. So essentially the mind appears to be an integral part of you, but actually it is not part of you at all in essence. It's the addition. It is only here to tag along you, like a tag, like a bumper sticker on your soul. So essentially, your mind is in reality the mind or the head of Kal. It is the agent of it. Now, only when you do ascend to Par Brahmanda, when you realize all the tricks, how the souls are captured and kept and confused, and maybe they become tired, they accept, well, that's the way it is. Maybe I'll be fine beyond duality. Maybe awareness is enough. Maybe the universal light of the mind is enough. So, you can accept things. You can become okay with it. Most yogis who reach that stage there, they can be pretty happy because it is already quite a feat in that sense, because very few do get to this stage, first of all. But once you realize deeply the bigger game at hand, you want to free your soul. And the trouble is that most of the yogis, they forget about their soul. There is no soul. There is only the self. There is only awareness. Well, what soul there is anymore? So they enjoy the light of the universe. They enjoy the light of awareness. They enjoy the self at this stage because the self may mean many things. So it can be this light and that and that and that. So they basically become so accustomed to this light of the universe or universal consciousness that what about the soul? So to speak, I am already beyond the energies, beyond dualities, beyond the concept of the soul. So what happens is that a yogi merges their attention into the universal consciousness and thus experiences that light and thus ignores the soul. So now let's pause right here. So the soul is the only thing that really stays life after life after life. And the yogi merges his attention into the universal consciousness and forgets about the soul. Boom, that's a trick. So essentially, a yogi forgets the real deal, liberation of his soul, and takes the trick of the light of the universe. So he gets illusioned enlightenment, so to speak, a drop of honey, and forgets about the real deal of his soul. And what happens after that, when the yogi passes away, what stays? Does that immersion of your attention stays or the soul stays? You drop the body, your immersion of attention drops as well. It was just an experience. Okay, it was a prolonged experience. And okay, you made your home within that experience because you merged your attention in it. But when you drop the body, the experience goes away. Awareness goes away. And what stays is the soul. And then since you ignore the soul, since there was no more need for the soul, well, the soul has a baggage. The soul was fooled in a way, fooled around with. It was ignorant. So it fell for the trick of Kal. And this is how Lord Brahm, with creation of his three sons, Vishnu, Brahman, and Shiva, is the prime lawgiver. He gave the laws, the Vedas. He said, do good things, you'll go to heaven. Do bad things, you will reap the fruits of karma. He explained it very clearly. That sounds like an eye for an eye, a tooth for the tooth principle, isn't it? Do good, you'll be fine. Do bad, you will suffer. Well, that's how things work here in the lower creation. That's true. Of course, we know that. It's true. That's how it happens here. But once the soul escapes all these tricks of Lord Brahm and goes at least into Par Brahmanda, there are no rules like that anymore. There is no tricking of the soul anymore. There is no negative karma as such anymore. There is no suffering as such anymore. So everything in Pinda, Anda, Brahmanda, including Lord Brahm, and most of the things known in Hinduism in terms of worshipping deities and hoping that they will save you, and trying to follow the Vedas and doing good deeds, so to speak, and accumulating virtues will only get you as far. And the soul, yes, might become less dense, but the mind hasn't left. The mind is still there. So the mind may become positive in nature. If you worked a lot on it, it can become cooperative, vehicle of consciousness. It can become a friend, a cooperative friend. Many of you are in this phase where you are supported by the mind, where the mind is kind of your friend because it says, well, you should do a meditation today because, you're losing your balance. So the mind reminds you, you should do some meditation today. Don't forget to read the book. Oh, today is, need to do some spiritual practice and maybe need to do some yoga today. So what mind may start becoming helpful, supportive. But then, as you know, it will soon trick you. It will bite you back, isn't it? If something goes wrong, you don't get what you want, something happens not as you expected, and the snake bites you back. That's why the symbol of the mind is a snake. And Shiva has the snake around his neck. Of course, he is in control of it, so the yogi tries to control it, and he or she can do that. So the snake is a symbol of wisdom, but also of its many negative aspects too. It can be your protector, your assistant, a tool. It can help you to discern from tricks and illusions. So in a way, a yogi needs to learn everything about all these tricky things of the mind. Then the mind sits next to you. The snake basically becomes your assistant. It can protect you with the wisdom, with intelligence gained, because now you are much more aware, so to speak. But still, it's a snake. It's helpful, but one step in the wrong direction and it will hit in your bum. So essentially, don't make the mind your home. Everything you have learned as such, as knowledge, as wisdom, as intelligence, it's not the real home. So your real home is not the no mind state. Now let's go to that topic, the no mind state. It's a concept which was coined at some point, probably through Buddhist tradition, but Buddha means awakened. And he used the term emptiness, but it's the awakened emptiness. And of course, then follows a lot of misinterpretations of further monks and nuns and all the people then who read those texts later on. They mix it all up according to what they understand. So this is why at the beginning I told you right away that the mind is neither divine nor infinite. And essentially the no mind, when you think of it, you don't want to be in the no mind state. You want to be in the pure light of God state. The no mind state is basically a certain voidness. Yes, you can be in this void or that void and experience the no mind, because in those voids, well, there is no mind, but that's not who you really are. You are not the void. So being very technical about these terms, you don't want to be in the no mind state. You want to be in the light of God state. You want to be in the love of God state, not in the no mind state. So this is a huge mishap in the Neo-Advaita adaptation, because they become happy to be in the no mind state, like walking zombies in the void, attention immersed voidness. That's basically what the no mind state is, void immersed attention. So you want to be in the absolute aliveness of the light and love of God. You want to be immersed in the divine existence, beyond any idea what is mind or no mind. Who cares when you're there? You don't want to even think about mind, no mind. You don't even need a mind. In the divine, there was never a mind. Only when creation came into existence, then these vehicles, like when you go scuba diving, you get a scuba diving suit with the oxygen tank. When you go for diving, yes, you get oxygen tank and then the costume and all of it, because you're going to dive into the ocean. So you take a suit. So the same way when the soul descended into creation, it adapted these vehicles of consciousness or different suits so that it can function within the creation. Now, the problems of mind, no mind, and the self is that, unfortunately, looking at the current Advaita, Neo-Advaita movements, they simplify everything so much that it becomes dry. The best case scenarios are the light of Brahman, usually realized. That's, let's say, the key stage of the self that everybody's aiming at. But the jiva, the soul, whatever term you want to use, it is essentially that which will continue. So even if you merge your attention into this stage of consciousness or that field of consciousness or that light of consciousness, you merge it now. Yes, you merge it to experience it, to realize that light. But once you drop the body, the soul retains that experience of the light of the universe, of the light of this, the light of that. So the soul retains the experience of it, but is that the freedom of the soul? That's a big, big, big question. And unfortunately, what we see is that most of the yogis and teachers, they go back for the next round of reincarnation. So the minimum real freedom that you do want to get to is for your soul to clear the karmas into at least Par Brahmanda region, so that you're done with the tricks of the Brahm, Lord Brahm, or Kal Niranjan. This will be a very important part in my second book to come, and with many details to follow upon this topic, because having looked at many gurus of the past and the present is having looked at their soul itself. The reality and the truth is not as pretty. So I tell you one more time that what happens is that they unite their attention with a certain field of consciousness. And in the extreme cases, you know that yogis can lock their attention into those higher fields of consciousness and they become dysfunctional. It happens. Meher Baba, you gave a priority, to visit these yogis who have locked their attention into these higher states of consciousness and they became dysfunctional because he experienced that as he was teenage, and he made a term called the masts. So that's how he called them, the yogis with locked attention. So they can get locked into various degrees, even samadhi, but again, even locking yourself in samadhi is still not liberation itself, because there is your soul and the body, its senses and the inner subtle senses are locked into that field of light. So once it is unlocked, yes, the soul has received that experience of samadhi, but has it cleared the karma that is keeping it, that pulls it back? That's the big question. If you forget about your soul, if you become very non-dualistic, this is why Krishna and many other higher degree gurus, they see this path as more integrated path. So as you know, in Bhagavad Gita, it is very well written that there is jnana yoga, yes, there is bhakti yoga, and there is karma yoga. So there are many, you need to incorporate different yogas so that you're balanced. Because if you do only one thing, most likely you are not balanced. You are not whole and complete. And this is why at Divine Marga, we incorporate many types of yogas. For example, at 400s, 500s, Inner Light, Love, Unity, we use a lot of Agni Yoga techniques, which are attunements with certain flames, the 7 flames. And we use Jnana Yoga for self-inquiry. It's a great tool to dive in and like a laser and pinpoint certain things and then help you disidentify. We do certain Bhakti Yoga practices of heart and love and devotion and connecting with certain deities and beings. We use Raja Yoga to gain clear insight into different regions of the creation. We use Nada Yoga, the sound currents, to liberate your spirit higher, higher up. Karma Yoga We use it to understand the causality of good and bad, action and effect. So we use all these different types of yogas to discern and to balance and go along the path. This way, you are not neglecting anything. You're not ignoring anything. You're not becoming too comfortable in what I know, and that's what I'm gonna stick with. So we always help you to move forward, higher up. So once you ascend, you truly go into Par Brahmanda. Your soul is no longer troubled. Of course, you may ignore your soul and you can be fine. You know, we can accept anything, even a stray dog can accept hardships of the world and be totally okay with that. But that doesn't mean happiness. That doesn't mean freedom. Some people want just to keep things simple. You know, just let me do one thing and don't bother about anything else. So that won't help either. It's a limited approach. So when your soul goes to Par Brahmanda, and not only you can experience the higher light, the more pure light and higher states of samadhi, but when the soul ascends to Par Brahmanda, it's no longer troubled. It's no longer pulled down. Pulling down of the soul is not what you commonly experience energetically. You may live in a peaceful environment and try to stay away from trouble and, accept that whatever you have is okay. But that is a fortunate circumstance. But the question is what the soul still holds within itself. So this requires a very clear look within the soul itself and to recognize and see what needs to be completed within it. Of course, this is a much greater task, much bigger job. We will dive into this more later on, but let's recognize that the mind of Par Brahmanda is, we can call it the pure mind. It's the enlightened mind. It has, of course, a lot of wisdom. Samadhi is common, bliss is common. If one is more oriented towards bhakti, can be ecstatic and blissful. So the mind in that region is permeated by the light of the soul, by the higher light of creation. And it's a happy mind. It's very cooperative mind, very helpful. It's like a great assistant that cares about your well-being, let me say. So the mind of Par Brahmanda is wonderful, really. It's beautiful. It's helpful. It wants to bring you more wisdom. And it loves to learn, by the way. It loves to grow. It loves to challenge itself spiritually. It wants to overcome boundaries, limitations, obstacles. It wants to gain valuable experiences. It wants the soul to achieve its primary purposes. It's the greatest helper for the soul, the mind of Par Brahm. Within the divine, there's no more mind. There's neither mind nor no mind. And it's such an immense presence of the light of God, such an immense love of God, immense permission of every cell of your being with the light of God. And the only true word that begins there is divine. And the soul, it's not even ecstasy, which is common in Par Brahmanda. If I remember my bhakti experiences of ecstatic kirtan and dances and how my soul was enjoying all of that in the divine, it's liberating. It's the true freedom. The true freedom. The soul knows that because it has reached that, it has returned back. And the soul regains so much light, so much beauty, so much perfection beyond perfection. And the joyous thing for the soul is to, in Sanmat or Sikh movement, it's called Simran. It's called remembrance of God. So the biggest joy the soul has is always remembering God, always being in God. So even the word the self, it doesn't envelop really what is the experience there, because the experience in the divine is maybe the glory of the self, if you want to use that language. Is the wonderness of the self. It's the freedom of the self, immense love of the self, if we use that language. We can say God or we can say divine. Now we can choose any words here. So now again, to contrast, if I say a no mind state of tranquility and voidness, boring. That's not the real deal. It's restful, yes. It's serenity, tranquility, restfulness, but that's not the divine. That's not the real deal. It's the void in essence. And this is where, when we look at Buddha, at his soul, he only used the word emptiness to assist. But what he really meant is the absolute light, nirvana. If I look into his soul, it's absolutely radiant. It's totally immersed in the divine. And then, of course, he then adapted tools of assistance for that time, for those people that were with him. So the present day Buddhist teachings are too dry in many ways, too mental, too philosophical. At the very, very best, reaching Parbrahmanda, at the very best, 99.9% of cases. So we need to change the thought of the mind. The mind is intelligence of creation, the light of creation. The Parbrahm mind is a very nice tool, vehicle of consciousness. And the mind of the Brahm is the bag of tricks. It can make you happy, best case, but it will bite you back the very first instance something will happen. It's a bag of tricks. Who was the first and truest beyond Advaita being? So his name of Kabir, but that's his name and his recent descent. But essentially he is Gyani, and he is one of the 16 original beings of Satpurush. So he represents the true divine intelligence or wisdom, divine knowledge. And thus the Advaita Vedanta is basically Jnana Yoga. Jnana is Jnana, basically. It's just the same saying in slightly different tradition. So Jnana Yoga, or otherwise Advaita Vedanta, the truest origin of it is Gyani. And his recent descent as Kabir. So that's why when he came down in the 1500s, he was very straight. He was so straight that he was absolutely clear of all the fallacies of Hindus and Muslims at that time. He was so clear of all the problems of humanity and all the problems of the three lower worlds and all the problems of Lord Brahm or Kal, because he himself was battling with Brahm, with Lord Kal. It's his brother, essentially, in the largest sense. And he saw how his brother, Lord Brahm, created the creation. trapped the souls and made all sorts of obstacles for the souls to leave. So he knew every single trick upon the sleeve and how to overcome it, how to bring the souls back home. So really and truly, the jnana or Advaita, Adi Shankara was a guru who synthesized some of the knowledge. But before all these other gurus, all those religions and teachings were given by Lord Brahm, or actually, well, by Lord Brahm, but then to Brahman. And the Brahman has given humanity instructions how to live, basic rules and laws. But when Gyani came to earth, he gave the way to true freedom of the soul. So the truest knowledge, the divine vidya, the divine knowledge is brought by Gyani and his recent form as Kabir. So therefore we truly owe to him for this way back home. And we can then simply see how the spiritual traditions branched out in the world. Some of them specifically to give instructions of living and how to be a good boy and good girl and not to cause too much trouble. Then instructions were given how supposedly to become free in the Vedas by worshipping the three key deities, with Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahman, and be subject of these three deities. And then we can see how the false spiritual traditions arose that keep souls busy, but none of them will escape. And then there's actually a story of a conversation of Gyani and Kal. And since Gyani said, I will come down and I will liberate the soul, then the Kal or Lord Brahm, he said, okay, well, I'm going to create false lineages of yoga that will keep the souls busy and will not get them anywhere far. And I will even twist the teaching so much that what you say, my dear brother Gyani, the souls will not be interested because the souls will be more busy in rituals, in worshipping of idols, in doing the physical asanas and basic energy management things, that they will not be even interested in the Shabd, in the divine light sound current. They won't even listen to you because I will make them so illusioned that I don't want anyone escape. So then he brought those false lineages to be distributed by his subordinates and to teach people in those busy ways of spiritual life, which will lead nowhere, which will lead only to the next life. So one day I will gather this conversation and we'll publish it as an article for you to read into it. And this is why I pay so much attention to the lineages of the world, to the spiritual lineages and where they go, how far they go. What do they really do for the soul? Is it just keep you busy and chasing the shadows or the lights of creation, or they lead you actually somewhere further and to more freedom?